let's talk about Dungeons & Dragons adaptations. Specifically two, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves and the Legend of Vox Machina animated series. Dungeons & Dragons, often referred to as D&D, is a tabletop role-playing game where you get to create a fantasy character that you roleplay as, and you're often joined by a party of other fantasy characters played by other people. These player characters can make characters ranging from an elf ranger and a frogman with divine and godly powers. Everything is on the table, and you should probably have a dungeon master or a game master to run the game. A dungeon master or game master curates the world and how it interacts with the player characters. The success or failure of these interactions are decided by the rolls of dice. In the last 10-ish years, D&D and TTRPGs have really kind of blown up, with an increased interest in the hobby due to media such as Stranger Things or Critical Role. Everybody wants in on the action. The Legend of Vox Machina is an animated series on Amazon Prime that follows the adventuring party of Vox Machina, and it is an adaptation of Critical Role's first streamed campaign, often referred to as Campaign 1. I never really talked about the first season of the show, even though I wanted to. I actually had a video planned out that was kind of becoming bigger than it needed to be, and I wasn't really feeling it anymore, so I kind of just nipped it in the bud. But I still want to talk about this show in some format, so that's what I'm doing here right now. Critical Role is what really got me into the idea of playing tabletop role-playing games, specifically Dungeons & Dragons. Just look at the amount of stuff I have to play D&D with. One man does not need this much dice. I have watched almost every single hour of all of their D&D campaigns, excluding Campaign 1, which I'm almost done with. I'm somewhere a little past the Chroma Conclave arc, so in the late 80s, somewhere around there. I had a fear that it wasn't recording there for a second. I love every character that this cast has created in every campaign thus far. It also helps that they're all extremely seasoned voice actors, and they're just a big group of friends that all have great chemistry with one another, and they're all just lovely people to watch. So the idea of them taking their D&D game that they did at home for fun and turning that into a Twitch stream, which became the biggest Twitch stream, and then turning that into a high-budget animated series on Amazon Prime is really cool. And it's even cooler that it actually got made. I don't think we've seen anything happen like this before. If you can think of anything in a similar situation, let me know in the comments down below. With such an out there idea, no studio was willing to fund an animated adaptation of a D&D campaign. So Critical Role took that, and they went to the fans, and they started a Kickstarter. And that Kickstarter raised $11.3 million, becoming one of the most successful Kickstarters of all time. And eventually the show was picked up by Amazon Prime, and the rest is history. Spoilers for Season 1 and 2 of The Legend of Vox Machina. Converting a D&D campaign totaling in 400 plus hours of content and streamlining that into an animated series was not an easy feat, but they pulled it off. Obviously, they had to trim a lot of fat because D&D campaigns have a whole lot of fat. Now, do I think Season 1 of the show is perfect? No, I do not. Do I think it's good? Yes. It definitely has its issues that I will talk about, but it is incredibly impressive to see how good the show turned out in the end. I really like the characters and the character designs of the Vox Machina team. They all have very distinct silhouettes that stand out from one another and just really pop when they're all next to each other. With such a large cast of characters, it's important from the very beginning to really understand who's who, and they all need to stand out from one another, or it just gets really, really confusing. And the two characters that are very similar in design actually get a lot of jokes thrown their way about how similar and hard to tell apart they are. My personal favorite design is Keyleth of the Arashari. I really like her antlers. I think they're really cool for her silhouette. I don't know if they're practical, but I think they're cool. The way the writers were able to consolidate this show down from how large the streamed campaign was is very impressive. The majority of the first season follows the Briarwood arc, with the first 2 episodes of the show being a smaller arc that took place before they started streaming their campaign. And this arc that they tell in the first 2 episodes was heavily consolidated for the sake of brevity and to get to the really juicy parts of the Briarwood arc, which is definitely the highlight of the entire first season. It's such a great arc to start with because it really shows how dark this show can get. Yes, it's a silly fantasy show, but it knows how to take serious moments and treat them with the weight they need to have. It doesn't undercut everything with a joke. It knows when to be heavy, and I think it handles it really well. The soundtrack is definitely a highlight. All of the music really makes the story feel so expansive and hits the appropriate beats needed to make moments of fear or awe hit as hard as possible. A couple of my favorites were No Mercy Percy and Fighting Back. I particularly love the way they used Fighting Back in the second episode of the show. It's so cool. All of the voice performances are great. This is a cast of seasoned voice actors, and they all know what they're doing, and it shows.
Let's keep things civil, friend. We're not looking for trouble.
I'll bet you ain't. Everyone knows you're a bunch of pathetic losers who can't get a fucking job.
And the animation is great. A lot of the action sequences are really creative and well choreographed. I love how creative the animators get with using each of the characters' unique abilities in fights. Every character can stand on their own in a battle, but can also prop each other up into doing some really cool combos that come out great in the animation. Although the animation can look great when it comes to the main cast of characters, there are a lot of creatures that Vox Machina face, and the animation for some of them does not look great. 2 examples. There are some undead creatures in one of the Briarwood arc episodes, some undead dog creatures, and they're 3D animated, and they really stick out and feel very off and out of place, and it doesn't really mesh with the rest of the style. But the biggest upset for me is the Blue Dragon Brim Scythe, which is the main villain of the first 2 episodes of the show. It's not even Brim Scythe's design, it's the animation style. It's such a different style than what is shown in the rest of the show that it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, and it feels like it's from another TV show. It doesn't feel like it's from Vox Machina. It becomes so noticeable when the reveal happens in the show because he has a transformation animation, and when it happens, it's in 2D and it's hand-drawn, and it looks so good. And then he fully turns into the dragon and just looks off. It doesn't look right. This looks better than this. My other main issue with season 1 is some of the humor. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Particularly the character of Scanlan Shorthalt can be, at times, obnoxious, if that's the nice way of putting it. Very annoying. More often than not, he will ruin any potential tension a scene has because he needs to undercut it with some unfunny joke, and usually they don't work for me. Overall, for a first season of a brand new IP, I think it's great. This is a really good start. There's a lot of things you can improve, but for a first season of a new IP, this is really good. This is a solid start. And the story is such a great starting point for these characters to build off of. I think it's really solid. 6 out of 10. On to season 2. But before that, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. That's right, I have a sponsor. Me. Click that like button, subscribe, and share this video around to your friends and loved ones. Last time I checked, only 5% of my viewers are subscribed, so please subscribe to the channel. For more content like this, I would greatly appreciate it. You beautiful gems. In all great stories, there is no better way to hook an audience and introduce them into the world and story you're about to tell them than with a great opener. The first thing they see can also fill them in on the tone to expect for the rest of the story. Season 1 has a very fitting opening for the tone it's trying to set, which is, "This ain't your parents' fantasy, we say fuck." In Season 1, we receive this cliché opening narration about the world of Exandria and the continent of Taldore. We are then seemingly introduced to our main characters, and they look very familiar. The rug gets pulled out from beneath us, and they get eviscerated. This is a great tone setter for Season 1. Throw out everything you'd expect from a standard fantasy series and expect a lot of brutal deaths and lots of comedy with a dash of meta humor. How does Season 2 open? Oh yeah. Season 2 opens with the world ending. Yeah, so this season has a great opening sequence, starting the season by putting the main cast on the back foot and destroying the biggest place of power in the world of Exandria, Amon, and turning it into an absolute crater in the ground is such a great way to open the show. It immediately raises the stakes. And what's this? The dragons look pretty good. Now that's what I'm talking about. Thank you. So they're still not 2D animated, and I understand the reasoning. The animation team has talked about how incredibly long it would take to animate such a large character in 2D animation. This new art style used seemingly makes the dragons look similar to the painted backgrounds, and I think it looks great. It doesn't look 100% in every shot, but it's a really good effect, and I think they use it to the best of its ability. It's a nice blend between 2D and CG, and kind of meets in the middle. It's way less jarring and feels like it should actually interact with the world when Brimscythe did not. I think it's so important for stories to have a really good opening, and Legend of Vox Machina Season 2 has it. Like, look at this and tell me how you don't find this cool. So the main plot thrust for this season is to gather some MacGuffins to power up the main characters to be able to kill these ancient dragons that are ruling over the continent. Simple? Yes. But a simple story executed well is still a great story. The gathering of these vestiges of divergence give each of the characters an arc to go along with each of their respective vestiges that they acquire. For example, we have the Titan Stone Knuckles that Grog can only gain when he comes to terms about the person he used to be. This forces him to come to blows with his uncle Kevdak, a physical embodiment of everything he used to be. And Vexalia's Fenthras Bow, which can only be gained when she learns to accept and love herself and to not need the approval of her father, who will never love her the way she wants him to. So, yeah, you might see the trailer for the show and just assume it's a silly but gory and crass fantasy series, which it very much is. But it also has a lot of heart. I think that's probably my favorite part of the show. In a world where all we get from adult animation in America is just pure nihilism and humor out of misery, it's really nice to see something that has truly genuine moments of emotion and love. I just think that's a good thing to have, and I enjoy it, because I don't feel like we see it very often. The arc that this season is adapting is called the Chroma Conclave arc. Now, the show made the wise decision of splitting this arc into 2 seasons, because the Chroma Conclave arc is very long. The first season of the show loosely adapted the pre-stream game in the first 2 episodes, with the following 10 episodes adapting the Briarwood arc. And the Briarwood arc spanned 15 episodes, and episodes of these D&D streams could be 3 to 4 hours long. Then you have the Chroma Conclave arc, which was 46 episodes long. Yeah, so I'm very glad they decided to make that call and split it in half. All of the action sequences are not only well animated, they're also really creative. I wouldn't expect them to fight a dragon by summoning a magic hand, climbing into the palm, and fisting the dragon to get inside its stomach, but that happened. That's what happened. That's what they did. I think the standout action sequence is the battle in the sunken tomb with the onlooker, or as I call it, the legally distinct beholder. The creature looks incredibly menacing, and it sounds menacing. There are some very eerie noises coming out of this creature, and I love how unsettling they are. It sounds really similar to the sound design in Jordan Peele's Nope, if you know what I'm talking about. I think an underappreciated aspect of the show is how beautiful the backgrounds are. All of the incredibly vast and detailed backgrounds really allow the world of Exandria to breathe on screen. It all feels so tangible. The entire animation team did a great job not only designing this world, but also breathing life into it. In the Fey realm scenes, everything feels so abstract and alien that makes it so distinct from the material plane. I can see some people having an issue with this season, as it has an unsatisfying ending, let's say. And that was kind of unavoidable in a way, because like I said, they split this 40 plus episode arc into half. You're splitting down an arc right down the middle, so I understand if anyone has an issue with that. Personally, it didn't really bother me, but there is an aspect that does feel unsatisfying at the end of the day. I greatly look forward to watching season 3 of this show. This is what I'm looking for out of Western animation. It delivers on what is promised, and I expect the same amount of quality in the following seasons. It was recently announced that Critical Role will also be adapting their second campaign into an animated series. This campaign will follow the Mighty Nine, and I'm very curious to see how the adaptation is going to go. Campaign 1 of Vox Machina is very easy to segment into arcs, you know. There's 3 major arcs that all flow into one another, and they're pretty segmented, and it's easy to separate them. The Mighty Nine, however, is split into 6 major arcs that are shorter than each of the Vox Machina arcs. And a lot of those arcs kind of feel like they are meandering and unfinished and loose ends by the end of the entire campaign. So there's going to have to be a lot of reworking and editing of the story structure to really make it work. It needs to feel cohesive, so I'm very curious to see how they handle that whole situation. I do have faith that they'll pull it off because of what I've seen in the Legend Vox Machina thus far. So I optimistically look forward to seeing that show when that comes out. So I'm giving Season 2 The Legend of Vox Machina a 7 out of 10. I also watched Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. This is the second attempt from a major studio to adapt a Dungeons & Dragons story and create an ongoing universe, with the first attempt back in 2000 being a massive failure. I have not seen it, and I would eventually like to because it looks very funny.
Let their blood rain from the sky!
Honor Among Thieves' whole energy and feel is very similar to that of a Marvel movie, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's fine. I think it's very fitting for what this movie needed to be and what it was trying to sell. I think you need to take this world and premise in a comedic light, because more often than not, Dungeons & Dragons is a very funny game to play. No matter how serious a D&D campaign starts out as, or the intention of its when it starts, it usually devolves into slapstick comedy. This movie feels closer in tone to Princess Bride than it does The Lord of the Rings, and I think that is the correct choice that they should have taken with this movie. Where The Legend of Vox Machina has a heavy story with dark comedy layered over the top, Honor Among Thieves feels more like a fantasy improv, which is very much D&D. This movie also has a pretty stacked cast, including Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and Mr. Bridgerton. And this cast has pretty good chemistry with one another. Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine have a very sibling energy that their characters shared with one another that's a lot of fun to watch on screen. Unfortunately, one character in the group does stick out to me as not as good, and that is Simon the Sorcerer. He's played by Justice Smith, who I have not really seen a single movie that he's in where I've really liked his performance at all. I really don't know what it is. He just keeps getting thrown in stuff, and I don't think I've ever seen a good performance out of him. He's been passable at best. And he seems to be struggling to maintain his accent.
I courted you. You said I made you feel sad. Not from anything I did, just from who I was.
And let me make this a point right now. You can explain anything in this movie not making sense by saying, well, the players that are playing these characters are making dumb choices because they're characters and it's a D&D campaign. We're not doing that. I am taking this as a Forgotten Realms story in the universe of Forgotten Realms with these characters, no players, because then I can excuse anything stupid in this movie. So we're not doing that because that opens a whole can of worms. They're just characters. Dumb stuff can still be pointed out as being bad. End of point. Comedy is the main focus of this movie, and I think for the majority of the story, it works. And obviously, comedy is subjective, but I think for the most part, all of this was really funny and a lot of fun to watch. All the humor has an improvised feel to it, which is incredibly D&D. The standout scene for me is the crypt scene where they are resurrecting undead soldiers to gain information. The comedic timing is so good, and all of the funny character voices and all of the flashbacks, it's definitely the standout scene. It's so funny. Everybody in my entire theater was busting up laughing, including myself. It's so good. I love this scene.
Were you killed in the Battle of the Everhorse?
Yes.
4 more questions, right?
Yes.
No, that wasn't for you. Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it. Only answer when I talk to you. Okay?
Why did you say okay at the end of that?
I didn't.
This movie is a light-hearted fantasy romp with lots of very fun action sequences to go along with the comedy. There were a few really well-executed action sequences in the movie. The first noticeable one was the single-take oneer with the wild shape ability. For those who don't know, druids have an ability in the game to shapeshift into various animal forms, and in the scene we see Dork, the druid, shapeshifting from different animals to escape the inside of a castle, and it's all done in one take, obviously, you know, cut together, because it's CG and all that, but it's still really fun to watch, and it's really impressive how they pulled it off, because I think it's a lot of fun to watch. Oneers are something you do to show off, and I think they showed off well. The other action scene that was really fun to watch was the final fight against the main villain. You get to see the entire gang just beat the shit out of them and do a bunch of really cool combos, and it's very entertaining to watch. I think the biggest surprise when I went in to see this was the amount of really cool practical effects, which I wasn't expecting. I was just kind of assuming it would all be CG, but I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of practical effects in this. Not only makeup, obviously you have the undead sequence and a lot of really cool makeups thrown in there, but a lot of really fun puppetry. Dungeons & Dragons has a whole set of fantastical creatures. Obviously some are shown using CG, but a lot of them are shown with puppets. There's a big fish puppet, there's some tabaxi, which are like cat people. There's cat people puppets and like masks they wear. There's an Aarakocra, which is a bird person, and they have a whole puppet rig they built for this bird person to walk around, and the wings flapping, and it looks awesome. It's really cool, and I'm glad they stuck all that in. The Dragonborns are all fully puppeted heads that go on people. It's all just really nice to see that practical effects aren't completely under the wayside. I think there's a charm to them. They don't look real. They just feel tangible. When I left the theater after seeing this, I immediately thought, oh, that was fun. And it was. It was a lot of fun. I don't think I'll ever rewatch this movie, and that's not because it's bad. It's just, I don't know if I'll get anything else out of it. I might rewatch a scene if I get the itch. But it's a fun, solid action comedy set in the D&D Forgotten Realms campaign universe. And it's exactly what it needed to be. Unfortunately, I don't think it did super well, so I'm not sure we're going to be getting another one. I hope so, because I think it was really great, and I'd like to see these characters in this cast again. So I'm giving Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves a 6 out of 10. Damn, I was really hoping I could give these 3 D&D adaptations all 6s. Then I'd have, 666, and it'd be funny, because that's the D&D thing, like satanic, panic. Nope. Vox Machina Season 2 couldn't just be a little worse, then I'd have to give it 6. I couldn't have the evil numbers. Damn.